got a great guest today. Kim Haas is going to come talk with us. Hey, she's right here. Yay! But Kim, can you introduce yourself to people? I know you've got some online stuff going on.
My name is Kim Haas. I live in the Northwoods in Wisconsin. Been here just under 10 years. And I just came from a 5-year group practice in mental health in Rhinelander. That would be the big city up here, if you're unfamiliar. Yes. If you need to find the Walmart, that's where it is.
Or Menards.
Yep. The Hobby Lobby. The big things. So COVID was a very interesting time. This is the first time we've really chatted since COVID, which is crazy because we used to kind of do monthly coffee chats, and I'm so excited to connect with you again since then. But so, yeah, I think as with everyone, COVID kind of introduced a whole different way things could be done, and for me that included therapy. And I was really kind of resistant to the idea at first until I got into it and figured out how much balance and what I call breathing room I could have, not having to commute and being home in between things and still serving people in the way that my gifts and training and all that jazz can do. So I left the group practice, which, by the way, I loved. Great people that work over there. And now I'm doing online therapy.
You serve, I was looking at your website the other day, individuals, families, couples.
Yeah, so my primary goal, the thing I get the most kind of just juice and jazz for is couples. Because I see that as kind of the center of so many things. You can extrapolate that then to kids. And, there's a lot of good research that show kids that are in a home where their parents are satisfied in their marriage. I don't want to say, happily. I really like to use the word satisfied because we got to get on this, good enough, we're all going to struggle, but they are satisfied. Those children have a lot better outcomes on a lot of different measures, like behaviorally and socially and academically. And then if you extrapolate that further, those children grow into be well-adjusted adults, and whether they choose to have families or not, they're serving in their communities, they're doctors, they're teachers, they're first responders, they're all these things, or even further, they have their own kids and it kind of repeats itself. So I really love working with couples. I really love working with parents. I found in a therapy setting anyway, they were crucial. Makes sense, right? They were crucial in helping their kids. I generally was not the one in the moment with kids. So helping guide parents to guide their kids.
I always tell people that the real work for therapy comes between sessions.
Yes, definitely. I heard this stat. I'm going to probably mess up the numbers because math is not my thing. I would tell people, even if I see you once a week, there's 167 hours in a week. That's 166 hours of the week that you have other things, And then even in that hour, how many different experiences and issues and, emotions and things you have to deal with. That's where the real work happens, yeah.
But yet, that's awesome, and not every therapist is really gets jazzed about couples, so I think that's awesome that's really where you found your niche. And when you can work with the whole family, that's the building block. That's the one that really sets the ripples off for huge transformation at home.
Right. Yeah, I tease. I'm it's kind of a unicorn because there are therapists that they see a couple coming and they're hiding under they're and it makes sense. Have you ever been at a dinner party and a couple friend of yours starts getting into it and that awkward just gonna slowly back out of that situation,
and I don't see that tension exploding.
Yeah, and I'm kind of
leaning in.
Come on in. What is this all about? That's weird. I realize that's weird.
We all have to have our things, right?
Right, exactly.
And the tension needs some help. And those couples, I think it's cool. And I'm really excited about your upcoming workshop that I do want to get into. And I told everybody that we would talk about a couple tips, maybe has some takeaway tips from today's short session or discussion about ways to make a marriage work. So some of those things that you lean into that a lot of people go oh no, that is stressful or anxiety provoking or a little scary, you're like, let's lean in, let's actually deal with this thing, and there's a way through it. I don't know if that's the best word for that, but there's another side to this. You don't have to stay there.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, I think we all kind of in theory know that, like, headspace know it when we get into these relationships, like that there will be conflict, but then we kind of act surprised when it happens. And so the workshop is based on John Gottman's work, and he spent 40 years, and he still is, following couples, observing them, seeing what works and what doesn't. He kind of says, I'm a plagiarizer. I didn't make any of this up. I just watch what couples do and then see if they stay together or not, and if they feel satisfied or not. And one of the crazy things for me when I first read it was about 70% of couple conflict is perpetual, meaning like they're talking about the same stuff and fighting about the same stuff repetitively. And, if we think about that, that makes sense, that we have two different backgrounds, two different perspectives, two different preferences, two different experiences of life, and we have to kind of merge those things together and figure out how to make it work. And so there will inevitably be tension in there. So, a lot of times I think one of the mindsets we need to take on is, let's get a little more comfortable with conflict. Not that it's got to feel good and warm and fuzzy, but that we aren't thrown off of our center by it, that we stick in those conversations a little bit longer, because number one, it's going to happen. And number two, the beauty of this, lifelong or, intimate connection is that it actually strengthens your connection if you get through the other side of it. It has potential to do that. You get through this difficult thing, and it's not just like, that's over. It's also, we feel more connected. We feel more understood. We feel like we understand them more, and we just did this really hard thing together. So, I think that's a good place to start of like why we would even want to do that.
It's like a reframe of conflict. I think when most of us hear conflict, we're like, oh no, that is to be avoided at all costs. That's a fight. That's bad news. But what you're saying is you kind of reframe it. It's a tense discussion.
Yeah.
It's uncomfortable. But it actually, if you can stick in there, and I'm sure I've read some of John Gottman's stuff too, and there's some really good practical steps to take that walk you through that conversation to get towards deeper intimacy, which, and to think of vast majority of our arguments are that cyclical, same stuff over and over. It's probably not that many tense conversations to go through.
Yeah.
To get rid of most of the tension.
Yeah, and it's, it's just under 70%, and that's perpetual. Like, we can't just compromise and come in the middle on this. Like, we fundamentally have different viewpoints of this. Like if I were to show you, a sculpture of a mountain, you are going to see a different perspective of it than me, and there's no changing that. And it's not necessarily true you get through it and then you never have it again. I like to think of it as like you keep the volley going longer, like a tennis or, any of those volley games longer. Like we can hang in there longer before either we're, slamming a winner down the line and woo, I beat you, or, we're just sitting out of the game all together and not doing anything with it.
Do you think it would be fair to say it's more about, like when you watch, I'll stick with the tennis thing, when you watch doubles tennis, they're on the same side of the net, but different sides of the court. So they see the ball coming differently, and they have different strengths of forward hand, backward hand, where they are, front, backwards, right, left. So it's acknowledging the differences and seeing that they can actually merge and work really well together. We don't have to fight each other just because we see something fundamentally different.
Yeah, I like that. I played doubles tennis in high school, and whether you play up at the line or which side of the court you played on, you usually had a preference. And I like that reframe of you're on the same team fighting a different enemy, because that can happen too. Like we feel like we're pitted against each other, and remembering that you're on the same team is really important mindset too, that we just have to have good communication about who's getting the ball and, which side you feel better on and that kind of thing. So that could work for sure.
You have the conference coming up in February.
Yeah.
At the Northwood Center here in Eagle River, Wisconsin, which is really nice. We just had a party for my grandmother. It's a very nice center.
Is it good?
Yeah. And so it's a full day?
Yep, it's February 12th, so Lover's Weekend, which, like, cliche, but also cute, and also, like, holidays are done, people are kind of settled, so I'm really hoping that can be a good time to commit and to invest and to not have a whole lot of other things competing with. But yeah, so February 12th from 9 to 4, and just walking through John's, essentially his book. It's the 7 Principles of Making Marriage Work, so working through each one of them, and practical exercises. So like I talk about sometimes therapy and mental health, and when we think things through, that it's like pie in the sky, we can't really touch it, and like, but we need handlebars to hold and shift and move. We need, like, the tools, we need something in our hands. Like, this all sounds nice and it makes sense, but what does that look like exactly? So that's what I love about John's work, and what I love about this workshop is, like, there's each principle, there's like a something to do and to keep doing and to get better at.
Yeah. So I'm wondering, what are those 7 principles?
Oh, this is...
I'll test you a little
bit. Now I'm in like the 5, one of those game shows, and like I can. So the first one is love maps. We have maps of where we go, and love maps are essentially knowing what our internal world of our partner. Not just your favorite color and your birthday and this and that. That's all important too. But like, what makes you tick? What are her fears, her greatest dreams, his insecurities? Their typical day. Like, I can can you say what your partner did today or has going on today or whatever? So love maps, turning towards each other. So, it can be common when we get in ruts that, like, we tune each other out, and even on those subtle comments, like, really, and physically turning towards and engaging with your partner.
Derek Rose actually has a song. I think it's called, like, Turn Toward the Middle or something. I'll have to link it.
Yeah, that would be, and it is. It's and the physical aspect of that too, where we put our attention, where our body language for it. Building fondness and admiration, super important. So it was something I was going to mention. A lot of times we end up talking about conflict because, of course, like, we're struggling with something. That's usually what we lead with. But we have to also remember, foundationally, we were friends. I mean, I don't think I talked to a single couple that they wouldn't describe them as their best friend, then like that they could talk to each other. And so that fondness develop, kind of getting back to that, we can get stuck focusing on the negative stuff. And it's just as important to be intentional about building that fondness back up when you're struggling, which then leads to what John calls positive perspective. So, that giving the benefit of the doubt to your partner, leaning more towards their strengths, giving them grace when it comes to a mistake rather than like nailing them to the wall for something.
Right.
So when you have that, you kind of build a positive perspective in your relationship. Then the conflict stuff gets to be, and I can't remember how he really breaks this up in terms of the number 7, but it's keeping the 4 horsemen out. These are ways of interacting with our partners that can really deteriorate a relationship.
Those are big. You don't need to describe them, but what are those for?
Yeah, so criticism, criticizing your partner, their character, their behavior. Hand in hand with that goes defensiveness. I mean, as humans, what is our natural inclination when we're feeling criticized? We're going to defend ourselves.
Absolutely.
And as natural as that is, it just kind of keeps the ball going back and forth in a bad way. Contempt is the worst of them. It's a superiority. I'm a better than kind of, how dare you sort of perspective. Really dangerous territory to get into. And we need to be careful with subtle things of contempt, like sneering and snarring and, kind of that thing. Yeah. And then stonewalling. And stonewalling is just kind of that shutdown, like just kind of disengaging altogether.
So nice to mention what those are, because I feel like so many people can identify, oh my gosh, that's totally what we do. And that's usually, I feel like it's those 4 things that tend to bring people to that like breaking point of we need help.
Yeah.
And that there's practical things that you can teach, that you can guide people through and give them more tools for their toolbox of how do we confront, how do we get rid of these horsemen.
Right, exactly. It's not just, yes, we can all relate to it because it's our human default.
Yeah.
And it's not just enough to know that that's what it is, but then what do you do? Again, I think people are really hungry for the handlebars. Okay, I know that we do this and I don't want to keep doing this, but then what is the alternative? And so that, there's alternatives to all of those that we'll talk about at the workshop. And the last of the principles are really shared meaning and dreams, is how Gottman puts it. Like, we each individually have dreams for our life, and those evolve and they change over time. And then, it's legacy stuff, our meaning together, like what stitches us together. And you can kind of look at this as like your North Star as a couple. Why is it worth all of this hard work? And what do we, in a very deep way, get out of this relationship with this person?
Yeah, it's a good one.
Yeah.
There's a lot of hope.
Yeah.
There's couples, like, you're going to address the struggles, but we're going to focus on the hopes. That's really how you get towards that healing part and transforming that relationship. And what a great way for, if you have kids, or people are always watching us, right?
Yeah.
Even if we don't have kids, if we're in relationships. And I think these things, while it's focused on marriage, they apply to a lot of relationships in life.
Yeah.
And if we can start transforming the way we, like, sort of confront our own default mode and shift it, we can transform so many things and really change the legacy. And then the positive spiral keeps happening instead of that negative one. So I'm really excited.
You mentioned the benefit to other relationships too, because you think about those 4 horsemen. You can have those in familial relationships and family of origin relationships, and a little bit of coworker and friend stuff. But and John's work extrapolates. He's got some books that go into other types of relationships. But just the way that we operate on a day-to-day basis, and it is interesting. I think I got turned on to John's work probably like 10 years or so ago, and have just been diving into it professionally and personally. And I was just talking to my husband Brian recently about, like, gosh, I think over the last, I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 years, it feels like it's starting to become a natural part of our dialogue, rather than like so much effort to think about it, because it does. And that's another thing too. It takes practice. It is not going to feel comfortable. We're breaking a default pattern. But then also, I've noticed engaging with other people in that way, back to your point about it helping so many more relationships than just the marriage one or the committed one.
Yeah. When you say, like, breaking those defaults and creating a new one, there's an analogy, a visual that I often talk with clients about is literally, it's that neuroplasticity in our brains. We're always forming new connections. But as we form new ones, we want to go to the well-paved 4-lane highway in our brain that's just set it on cruise. We just go for it. For good or for bad, it's easy. We just know how to do it. We don't even have to think about it. Yeah. But when we're forming a new one, we got to get out the machete. We got to intentionally, like, move the tree out of the way, or the chainsaw or whatever. We got to whack down the tall grasses and step over the fallen logs and pick up the sticks and move the stone. But soon, as we intentionally choose to go there and work on that new path, it gets smoother, it gets wider, and then eventually, when we're not using the superhighway anymore, cracks start to become visible, potholes develop, and soon they look similar, and then the one that was the new path is suddenly a smooth highway, and the 4-lane highway is getting all corroded and hard to navigate.
Yeah, I love that. Another picture for people is the wheelbarrow. We're going back and forth, and imagine what happens. Well, you create this rut, right? And so then getting out of the rut, it takes oomph, and then likely you're going to fall back in it. Like, and I love where you extend that to then the smooth pathway. But, like, I think it's an encouragement that this is not an overnight thing.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of practice, but it can be done, and we don't have to give up on what our hopes and dreams were for marriage or long-term relationship in the beginning.
Yeah. That's one of the nice things I like about the love map is you go back to what was it that originally drew you together, and those hopes and dreams. And it might feel like right now in the middle of the crisis or whatever's bringing you into going, we need to make a change, that you can go back to resurrecting those things and those dreams. There might be certain things that you do need to grieve and release, but there's hope for those new ones, and for some of them coming back to life, or even coming back to life in a better way.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yay. Cool. So I'm my brain's just spinning with a few different art ideas. So in my newsletter, I'm going to take some of these ideas, and I'll make an art activity for one or two of them and put those in there, and people can sign up for that at hopeandhealingathome.com. How can people connect with you more and sign up for this workshop you got coming up in February?
Yeah. So
or for the online therapy too, because they might not be local.
Yeah, so, and there's lots of avenues that kind of get you to the same place. ThrivingLifeCounseling.net is my website for, more about me and my one-on-one services. And there's also a sliding bar for the workshop to be able to click into that. I don't know the URL offhand for the workshop because it's from eventcreate.com. And I think you'll probably link the actual website to it where it's got, it's got extra numbers and letters and all sorts of.
Yeah, I will definitely in the newsletter, I'll put the links for those things. And then you also, in my post here, I also put the QR codes that you have for your website and the workshop.
Yes. I entered into the 21st century of made a barcode. Like, the first time I did this, we had the tear-offs and the signs, and I'm like, we are not in 1990 anymore. What else? So, and that's where you can get even more information about what it looks like, what the day looks like, what you get. There's materials that you get to take home with you, which I think is fantastic, because, again, it's a one-day thing. It's not going to turn, the ship entirely. And you can register there and pay all on that same website. So it's a one-stop shop.
And what would you say, just kind of to wrap it up, what would you say, as you've gone through this personally and professionally, is your favorite or your biggest takeaway or your favorite takeaway from Gottman stuff that helps like marriage work?
Yeah, oh my gosh, because there's 7. It's like trying to pick your favorite, flavor of ice cream or something. Because they do all work in tandem and in different, situations or whatever. You need different tools. But I think if I had to sum it up, and maybe this is more of a personal takeaway, it's something along the lines of being humble and not taking yourself too seriously. I mean, you really need to take a look at your individual role in a dynamic and what can I do, which tool do I need to do right in this moment. And that takes a lot of humility, it takes a lot of courage, it takes a lot of vulnerability to do. So I think that's kind of how I would sum any 7 of them in, and all of the work whittled down.
You really have a lot of personal choice and personal empowerment in a situation, even if it feels like it's the other person that is carrying the bulk of the blame for why you're in an argument or something you're not happy. But there's always that choice of how you respond and how you take it.
And ultimately, that's all we have control over, right? Like,
right?
We can, and this isn't, the thing with marriage too, or committed relationships, like, we influence and impact each other. But at the end of the day, like, this is my lane and that's your lane. And that's why it's so messy.
It is. Oh, that's great. So being humble and choosing your own personal route is.
Yeah. Or if you want to be, silly about it, like, just don't take yourself so seriously.
Life's not that serious. We're not that serious. We can go with the flow a little bit more.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. There's one other thing that just popped into my mind. I was flipping through your Instagram a while ago, and I think, is it like conversation or question cards or something? Yeah. Can you mention that real briefly? What is that?
Definitely. So at the workshop and Gottman Institute, they still sell them. They're cards, and they're just like you see. Grandma's Toy Box has them, conversation starting cards or whatever, but these are specific ones they came up with. There's love map ones, and there are open-ended question ones.
And so like conversation prompts.
Yeah, they're conversation prompts, and they, I couldn't believe it. They made that into an app, and it's a free app. It's iOS and Android compatible. And I'm like,
Oh, wow.
I mean, I love having the cards on, hand, whatever, but
Something about tangible, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and so I'm pretty sure their entire deck series is in there, because they've got a lot of different ones, and it's a really great resource to have. But
That's
couples
awesome.
that come to the workshop also will get 2 of the touchy, hands-on ones.
The actual tangible cards.
Yes.
That's terrific. There's a lot at this workshop.
Yeah.
I'm definitely going to keep referring people to it. It sounds amazing. And I will put a link to that app in the newsletter as well, because that sounds awesome. You could pull that up when you're in a car ride or at dinner when you're like, this is awkward. I don't know what to talk about. Here, somebody else can invent the question.
Yeah, and
really
like it's a prescription, that I give to people a lot. Like 10 minutes of cards 3 times a week or something. Just go, and it'll be amazing where it'll take you. The other thing I thought of, and I wanted to mention, there's an early bird special on the workshop until Christmas. So that's kind of why we're talking about it early and getting on people's radar.
So what a cool gift that you could give each other.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Like, here's your Christmas gift, and then for Valentine's Day, we're going to have a day all to ourselves.
Do it, yeah. I'm trying to work with some local business owners to see if there's some date night things we can incorporate with it. Like, I know it's hard to spend a whole day sitting and learning and talking, and, I'm trying to stay tuned for that, whether there will be some kind of partnerships on how can we also turn this into a fun date.
That's a great idea. Like a discount on coffee or 2-for-1 appetizer or something.
Yeah.
Oh, that's really cool.
We'll
so tangible things, practical things, maybe discounts on a fun date night?
Maybe fun, keep the fun, not just all tension. So
that's so important.
Yeah.
There's fun in there too.
You gotta keep it there.
You gotta keep the fun. Well, thanks so much for being part of this live today, and I'm excited about what's coming for you.
It was a great first live experience.
Yay! Well, thank you everyone for joining, and if you have questions, obviously you can catch Kim at NWGal, is her Instagram handle, and her website, and all sorts of good stuff. So,
all
thanks.
Right. Yep, take care. Bye.
You too.